views. Next slide, please. So, I'm sorry, it's quite funny to have these yellow stripes on my slides. I don't know where they've come from, but don't worry. What were we asking in the systematic review? What is the effect of ivermectin versus no ivermectin for COVID treatment? And we were also looking at what is the effect of ivermectin versus no ivermectin for COVID prevention. Next slide, please. We found 24 randomized controlled trials. 3 of these were quasi-randomized trials. There were 21 treatment trials that included more than 2,500 participants, and there were 3 prevention trials of including around 738 participants. The trial size ranged from 24 to 476 people, and most trials were registered. That's 20 out of the 24 trials were registered on clinical trial registry sites before they were undertaken, and they were self-funded mostly and clinician-driven. So these were doctors, professors in other countries, many countries, 15 countries around the world, who undertook these trials because they thought ivermectin might work. And so most of these studies had no obvious conflicts of interest. There were 2 studies that were funded by pharmaceutical companies. The conflicts of interest in the one were against ivermectin, and the conflicts of interest in the other would have been in favor of ivermectin. Next slide, please. The trials were conducted in 15 different countries, so Argentina, Bangladesh, Brazil, Bulgaria, Colombia, Egypt, India, Israel, Iran, Lebanon, Nigeria, Mexico, Pakistan, Spain, and Turkey. And this is a widely used medicine. It's used, been given 4 billion times. It's used to prevent worms. It's used in mass drug administration campaigns in Africa and to prevent river blindness. And so these studies were conducted in countries that are familiar with using it, and it's widely used. Next slide, please. And this is what's called a forest plot. It's a meta-analysis. Which if you look on the left, you see the list of studies. We've subgrouped them according to mild to moderate COVID and severe COVID. There was one study that included mild, moderate, and severe COVID data, and we couldn't separate out the data, and we just planted in its own category. Others, there's been a systematic review done since ours. It's on a preprint website, and they've actually put that study, so I don't know what happened there. I've lost the, there we go. They've actually put that study in the mild to moderate group. And there's a rationale for doing that too. So it's not good or bad. It's just they've done it differently. They come to the same conclusions as us, that there's substantial reductions in death. We got on our summary is the yellow stripe at the bottom. The pink stripe at the bottom, which shows a 62% reduction in deaths and a 95% confidence interval of 27% to 81%. And there's a fair amount of what we call heterogeneity, and this is inconsistency, and this is due to the fact that these studies use different doses, they use different patient populations, some severe cases and some not. They use different combinations, so often the combination therapy, especially in severe COVID, a lot of these patients were receiving lots of different treatments anyway. So, and there were standard protocols. For example, in Egypt, all patients get hydroxychloroquine. So, so the heterogeneity is to be expected, and I don't think you can get higher certainty evidence than moderate certainty evidence for deaths. But you have to remember that deaths is a very, very important outcome when it comes to COVID. And it's very meaningful and very important to people and health professionals. We all want to prevent deaths. So you can see in absolute terms, across these studies, we had, there are 30 deaths in the ivermectin group out of 1,300 and 89 deaths out of 1,138 in the control group. And that's the equivalent of about 2% deaths occurring in the ivermectin studies overall, and about an 8% risk of death in the control studies. I must just say most of the patients in these studies were hospitalized. There were a couple that were very early and were outpatient, but mostly they were hospitalized patients. Next slide, please. I think if you could just, yes. So the secondary outcomes included improvement. I'm just showing you the ones first that showed a clear difference. So there was 25% more people with mild to moderate COVID improved with ivermectin, and that's represented in that 1.25 effect estimate there. Obviously, there's a confidence interval going up to as much as 45%. And in the severe COVID group, there was just one study that showed really quite a dramatic effect in improvement in the severe COVID subgroup, but just one study, and we're not very certain about this evidence. Next slide, please. So if you could go back one. And with deterioration, so this shows a risk ratio of 0.35, and what this corresponds to is a 65% reduced risk of deteriorating. So people who got ivermectin had a 65% less likely to deteriorate. Well, there were 65% fewer people who deteriorated in the ivermectin group. Next slide, please. With regard to other secondary outcomes, recovery time to negative PCR tests, just a few studies that looked at this. In actual fact, it's not that a few studies looked at it, it's just that a few studies had the data that could be extracted in this way that we could use in a meta-analysis. Other studies reported it, but they reported at fixed time points. So this is mean number of days to negative PCR tests, but there were several studies that reported a negative, they reported it as a categorical outcome, yes or no. On day 7, was the PCR test positive or negative? And so those data aren't captured in this meta-analysis. And so although this is low certainty evidence showing that people who got ivermectin had negative PCR tests on average about 3 days sooner than those who didn't, and we graded it low certainty, if one was to actually look at all the body of evidence which shows, on this outcome in terms of time to negative PCR test or the categorical outcome, negative PCR test, yes.
Do you believe in PCR test at all?
Yes, I know. Well, anyway, this is what is used. So we can only.
How many of you around are doctors, laboratory doctors around? No one of you. Only me.
I was assuming everybody's. I thought everybody was a doctor.
Do not assume. Do not assume. Do not assume anything. Do not assume anything.
Sorry, I'm not sure. Are you talking to me?
Yes, I'm talking to you.
Okay.
Exactly. Exactly, I'm talking to you.
So this is the world doctors.
PCR tests are bullshits.
Can you?
Sorry, am I speaking? If I could just ask.
Can we hear out the presentation first,
please? You did assumption that
PCR
test means something.
Test, please.
All right, Karen, could you please mute because?
Can you mute, Karen? Can you mute everyone apart from Tess, please? Thank you. Carry on, Tess.
Sorry, I was a bit confused there. I thought everybody here was a doctor. Is that?
Yes, yeah, you're in a medical.
You are not a doctor. Me are. I am a doctor. You are not.
Well, so
can we hear out the presentation first and postpone the discussion?
Where is the presentation, please?
Okay. Well, I just want to clarify. I'm a medical doctor. I'm a medical doctor and a researcher. So I have a medical degree and a PhD.
No, you are not a laboratory doctor, please. You haven't had in laboratory at all.
No, I'm just reporting the evidence from the.
Where is the evidence, please?
Could we please finish this talk and then have the discussion? Please shut up. Thank you.
Okay. So what else? The other secondary outcomes that we found. That there was very little data on this, were admission to ICU, mechanical ventilation, and admission to hospital. And there was very little data on these, no clear difference, and so for those outcomes, the evidence
Не
is
mam
very
никакво
uncertain.
намерение да се занимавам почти.
Next slide, please. Are you managing, Karen? Is there a problem?
Yes, my screen is frozen. Sorry.
If you let me share screens, okay. So the other thing that was reported was serious adverse events, and there were 11 studies that contributed data to the meta-analysis for serious adverse events. More than 1,500 people in this meta-analysis, but only 9 serious adverse events reported, and there was no clear difference between the groups. So there's very little data. Very severe adverse events are very rare, and really there's nothing more to say about that. Next slide, please. There were also 3 prevention studies, and this was when ivermectin was given to healthcare workers or given to family contacts of people who had COVID. So overall, there was about a 5% risk, a 5% rate incidence of COVID infection amongst the people who got ivermectin, compared with about a 40% incidence of COVID infection in the control group, and overall, this corresponded with an 86% reduction in infection. So and up to as much as 91%. In actual fact, the study by Professor Schumann in Egypt was closed early because the effect of ivermectin was so dramatic, and he just felt it wasn't ethical really to continue to not give the families ivermectin in the control group. So, and yet, we had to grade this as low certainty evidence because of study design limitations. So we were very strict in the meta-analysis and in our grading. And to be honest, when one takes into account the huge body of evidence, particularly there are many other non-randomized trials, larger ones where they've used ivermectin as prevention, it's clear that ivermectin is very effective for prevention, and it's not low certainty evidence. It's pretty good. High certainty evidence, I'd say. Next slide, please. This is quite an interesting aspect to our paper. It's a trial sequential analysis done by our biostatistician. And what it shows is the ivermectin trials over time. Early on, so above this line, you've got favoring ivermectin. Below the line, you've got favors no ivermectin. And this would be going back to sort of August last year. With the first trials, and this is sort of over time. This red line here is December, which shows we had an information size of 1,810, and at that time, this is the outcome death, our primary outcome, I should have said in the beginning. So as the data accumulated and the trials were done and reported and posted, we get to information size of 1,810, which suggests that anything after that point, too many trials may have been conducted. So around about December, we had enough information on ivermectin in terms of its reduction, its effect on reducing deaths, to actually say this is worth a shot. Next slide, please. So I think there's something weird happening with these slides, in that they're not actually exactly the way they looked when I sent them to you, Karen.
I'm sorry, Kat.
One day I'll have to show you what they really look like. But in any event, there's something missing on the right here.
Why don't you let Tessa share screen?
Want to share, Tess?
Can you do that?
Yeah, let me just share my slides.
Sure.
I think that would be better. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Yes. So I'll just go. Whoops. I'll just scroll down to we're over here. And do you want me to put it on full screen, or are you okay with me working it this way? I could put it on a slideshow. Okay, so what I do for a living is I do these guideline development meetings, as I said, as an external consultant. And when we've done their review and we came to the conclusion that actually there's enough evidence on ivermectin and it needs to be communicated as quickly as possible. I sent it to WHO and they weren't interested, basically, and I got no response. And so I thought, well, let me get a panel of experts and other stakeholders together, just like WHO would do, and conduct a WHO-style guideline development meeting on the 20th of February. So I followed the WHO guideline development handbook, which is, what I do, and I put together a document called an evidence to decision framework. And I called the meeting the British Ivermectin Recommendation Development Meeting. And we had a lot of interest in this meeting from around the world. The UK, not so much, because the doctors here are not used to ivermectin, and in mid-February, they didn't seem to know much about ivermectin at all. But we had representatives, health professionals from 15 different countries around the world, lots of professors. I think there were 11 professors at the meeting. And we went through step by step the process. Now, usually, in the guideline decision-making process, you don't just look at the evidence on effects, you look at the evidence on values. Do people value the outcomes associated with the intervention? Like death, people do value the outcome of death quite a lot and prefer not to die. Resources. How costly is it? Does it require, is it labor intensive, personnel intensive? Is it a fair intervention in terms of equity? Can the vulnerable have it? Can low and middle income countries have it? Is it acceptable? We know it is acceptable because many people around the world, billions of people, probably half the world's population has had ivermectin at some point. And how feasible is it? Well, again, it's very feasible for that very reason. It can be self-administered and doesn't need refrigeration or anything like that. Has a long shelf life and is widely used already. So we also, at that meeting, looked at many different additional considerations, which is standard practice at WHO meetings. So we considered that there are many non-randomized and observational studies on ivermectin which show that it works. And also loads of real-world data. I mean, you might be aware of what's happened in India lately, and last year as well, Uttar Pradesh was using ivermectin, and they had very low rates of COVID. There's also African countries that use ivermectin as part of mass administration campaigns for worm control, and those countries have had fewer COVID deaths than the African countries that don't. There are old age homes that use ivermectin for prevention and treatment of scabies, and they've had fewer COVID deaths and infections. There's also expert opinions from the USA, Australia, Philippines, Argentina, Zimbabwe, Honduras, and many other countries that are in favor of ivermectin. Ivermectin's inexpensive. According to the World Health Organization essential medicines list, it's in 2018, the direct cost of making it was 3 US cents per 12 milligram tablet. So it's generic, and there's many manufacturers worldwide. Any country can set up a factory and start making it. There's no refrigeration, as I said, no administration costs. But the authorities keep harping on about the fact that they're very concerned about its safety. They're very concerned that it might be dangerous and should rather be a veterinary medicine. So, this is rather a curious stance, given that more than 3.7 billion doses of ivermectin have been given over the last 40 years. And I went onto the WHO's Vigi Access Pharmacovigilance database today, just to show you that since 1992, there have been 20 deaths registered against ivermectin. And 5,484 adverse event reports, as I say, since 1992. But if you look at remdesivir, which is approved, since last year, there have been 534 deaths and over 6,000 adverse event reports. And for the COVID vaccines on the same database, just since December or so, there have been 6,667 deaths and over 1 million adverse event reports. So there's clear double standards here with the authorities, with them so concerned about ivermectin, in spite of all these billions of doses being given, and not voicing any concern about the COVID vaccines, with over 1 million adverse drug reports. So the BIRD recommendation in February was that ivermectin should be recommended for both prevention and treatment of COVID-19. And my activities since then and that of the group, we are largely made up of volunteers, and our activities are crowd-funded. But the aim is or the mandate is from the public, who fund us, is to disseminate the evidence, and we do this. We've got doctors' letter templates, politician letter templates. I give loads of talks, continue to do research. We do international outreach through meetings with key stakeholders. So we now have, we've held conferences. We've had more than 36 different countries represented at our ivermectin conference in April, and around 1,000 participants. And I've just been speaking to Sri Lanka, we're speaking to different countries, different politicians, doctors groups, and so on. And we've had 2 conferences since February. We also spend our time trying to get regulatory approval in the UK, and we have now a consultant, ex-pharma, helping us with that. And we also continue to do write scientific manuscripts and reports. I'm embarking on something called the Ivermectin Buyers Club, and I hope to be able to tell you more about that once it is set up. So I don't know if you want me to tell you more. If you've had enough of me, I'll stop talking.
Tessa, thank you so much. It's fascinating. We're really interested in the ivermectin buyers club. I'm sold on the on ivermectin, having used it. I sat next to my dad at dinner after he'd been vaccinated, and I came down with a fever the next day, and ivermectin fixed my symptoms. I had like gastric kind of gastrointestinal upset symptoms, and it really fixed those. So I'm sold on ivermectin. I don't know if we've got 2 minutes for Nigel to share his story again. I don't know if everyone's heard his story already, but Dr. Nigel Eccles would be fabulous just to fit in for 2 ticks, and then we come back to you, Tessa, for questions. Are you there, Nigel? Or have you gone for your siesta?
No. I had my siesta a little earlier, so I'm all right, fighting fit. Okay, so I'll just relay it very quickly, because I know a lot of you have heard the story before. But really, this was dating back to January. I'd already been doing some research on ivermectin off the background of having written a report for doctors to advise them on how they could protect themselves if they're working on the front line for COVID treatment. Excuse me. So January, unfortunately, my 84-year-old mother caught COVID. And she was at home, but her oxygen saturations were dropping to 80%. So reluctantly, we had to allow her to go into hospital, which was a terrifying thing because, we were hearing stories of people going in and not coming out again, particularly elderly people. So I spoke to the admitting consultant, and he, almost his first words to me were, she's not a suitable candidate for resuscitation, having told me that she was COVID positive. So what that told me is that the expectations for an elderly person going into hospital were very grim. They weren't expecting them to survive. So anyway, let me fast forward this story. 3 weeks into her admission, she was losing weight, poor appetite. She was on dexamethasone and oxygen. But every time they tried to take the oxygen from her, she desaturated again. She was on antibiotics. At this point, I spoke to a different consultant who she was under now and said, have you heard of ivermectin? and the work that's been done. She hadn't. So I said, look, let me send you some research on it. Have a look at it and I'll call you tomorrow. Let me know what you think. Anyway, her conclusion was, it's very interesting. I've spoke to my colleagues. They think it's too experimental. I cannot prescribe it. So I said, well, look, I want my mother on ivermectin. I can prescribe it for her, can't I? So anyway, this consultant agreed that if I sent the ivermectin into the ward, she would write it up on my mother's drug chart so that the nurses gave it to her over a 5-day period. So within 5 days, my mother was discharged from hospital. So I'm absolutely convinced, this was my first real experience of ivermectin, absolutely convinced it saved her life. She was not looking like she was going to come out of hospital, but within 5 days of her starting ivermectin, they discharged her.
Fantastic. Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. What more proof do we need, really? And I think we're going to get more proof from lovely Dr. Jennifer from Canada.
Zach, please could we let Dr. Margareta Gritz-Brisson in again? She got thrown out.
Yeah, I haven't got controls. I think Karen's got controls.
I will.
Karen, thank you. And then we'll come back for ivermectin questions after the end of Jennifer's talk. I can't see you. Are you still there, Jennifer Hibbert? Dr. Hibbert.
There we go. Okay, can you see me okay?
Yes, and then we can go for questions after both you and Tess, if that's okay.
Sure. Hi, everyone.
Welcome. From
Thank
Canada,
you.
Jennifer.
I'm in Toronto, Canada. It's my pleasure to be here attending this World Doctors Alliance. I'm a co-founder of the Canadian COVID Care Alliance. We started this alliance about 3 months ago, and as a non-for-profit, independent membership-based organization, we're a growing group of Canadian doctors and scientists, healthcare workers, and specialists from several other fields. And we're committed, like all of you, to provide evidence-based information about COVID-19 to the Canadian public and beyond. We operate with integrity and, like all of you, with a lot of courage in all that we're trying to communicate. Our aim is to reduce, like all of us, hospitalizations, save lives, and restore the balance in our country and for those beyond our borders as soon as possible. Our priorities include guidance and education, and providing information about important research, prevention. Karen, were you going to put up the slides, by the way? Sorry, I just stopped talking. Karen, is Karen there? Yes, I'll do that now. Yeah, because people can look at that while I'm talking. Anyway, yes, our priority is to give guidance and education and information about important research, prevention, treatment, and advocacy. And of course, our core initiative is Canadian. We're continually seeking affiliation with like-minded organizations nationally and internationally. As you can see here, Stephen Malthouse is here from the Canadian Doctors Alliance. We attend each other's meetings and share and collaborate on many fronts together. So it's really nice. So thank you so much for having me here. And I'm glad to introduce our alliance. And I just had a few slides here just outlining what I had just talked about. So you may have seen things in the media. We have a few members that have become quite prominent in the media. Dr. Byron Bridle was talking about the vaccines and vaccinating children. We've had, unfortunately, I think Stephen Malthouse may talk about it too, doctors speaking up, getting their licenses removed and getting them removed from their positions in the hospitals. I think this is probably all too familiar with all of you. Anyway, that's really my short presentation because I got kind of fit in here at the last minute to meet all of you. Thanks.
Oh, really, is that all, Jennifer?
Yeah,
I can't thank you enough for coming. Thank you. It's so nice just to connect with all of you heroes around the world, and because I always leave these meetings feeling great, and it gives everyone hope. And we hope the idea is to give the public hope as well. You know, that we can get out of this. I don't know what word you call it. I call it tyranny. But if we can get out of this tyranny, we're going to be a better world for it, for sure.
These kind of meetings, thank you very much. These kind of meetings we all need, because we need to keep boosting our energy and our force together, because it's a difficult time we're all in right now. So thank you for hosting this meeting.
Yeah, I just want to throw the floor open to questions about ivermectin, because we've got Tess and we have experts here. Anyone have questions, please?
Can I just tell you something too? Because just one of the initiatives we're working on right now, because Canada, it's only recently that I could even find a doctor that would prescribe ivermectin. I'm a dental surgeon actually, but got involved with this, the whole everything to do with ivermectin over a year ago, and was looking for a doctor and found one in Toronto. And so then started this whole alliance and brought everybody together, and all the brilliant minds we have coming together now. We are working on setting up a remote doctors telemedicine group, and we hope we can get it going. So we actually have a group of doctors. We now have 7 or 8 that we can identify. Stephen, you may have more in your group too, to try and start a telehealth for people to get early treatment. So that's a big step in Canada.
Okay, that's great. And you're not alone. There's quite a few dentists here. I'm a dentist too, one of those weird holistic ones. Are you one of those weird holistic ones?
Listen, if it works, I'm for it. I'm totally open-minded to everything.
It's cool. Has anyone got any burning questions about ivermectin, apart from how do we get truckloads of it into our country?
I would have one question about the study that Tess presented. Was there any stratification in terms of starting date of ivermectin after beginning of onset? Is there any correlation with early onset versus late onset in the effect of ivermectin? Could that be extracted from the data, or was that not possible?
It wasn't possible, but you do get, so we separated our data according to severity of disease. So we had mild to moderate and severe disease in a separate subgroup. And the effect estimate for the mild to moderate subgroup was better than the severe disease subgroup. So it suggests that early, using early is much better. The earlier you use it, the better. And I think certainly from the observational studies and non-randomized studies, it's clear that if you treat early, you keep people out of hospital. And there's a large study. Mexico City actually did a great study. The authorities there, they did a study where they tested everyone with PCR, rightly or wrongly, and then those PCR positive, they gave these test kits with ivermectin, paracetamol, and zinc. They did a before-after study. So before, they had 200,000 COVID cases, and after they had 70,000 or so COVID cases. And after giving the ivermectin, they reduced their hospital admissions by 52 to 76%. And so now they've rolled it out all over, and you just see their COVID rates have really come down. So, it's so apparent. It's just so obvious and common sense. And the same with, for example, Uttar Pradesh last year in August. Now, Uttar Pradesh, up until this year, has basically, it's got a population more than the UK, but much more than the UK. It's got 210 million people. And they had lower rates of COVID and deaths than the UK. So, how did they do it? Well, August last year, they started using ivermectin. They actually they set up these kiosks around the place, and people could just come and get it was ivermectin, doxy, and zinc, and vitamin B, a little kit. And that's how they kept off. And then 6 weeks later, or 4 to 6 weeks, their rates were completely down, and they continued to do that until this year. The WHO was saying, no, you mustn't use ivermectin, it's dangerous. So the government said, stop using it. So they stopped using it. And then they had the death rates went up again in March, April, May, until until they then reinstated it. We did a joint statement along with the FLCCC and with this press release over there, endorsed the government's position, previous position on rolling out ivermectin, and so they put ivermectin back in the program, and now the rates are down. And in Tamil Nadu, they didn't do that. They actually used remdesivir. Gilead dumped a whole lot of remdesivir in Tamil Nadu and said use this instead. And their death rates are totally, off the wall, and they've had no decline in COVID cases and deaths like Uttar Pradesh and Goa and the other states that have used it. So it's so obvious, and it's so obvious the authorities are just obfuscating the evidence and kind of delaying as much as possible. I mean, in the UK now we have the authorities, just because we've done this, our paper was published on Saturday, and then, suddenly yesterday or the day before, they're saying, oh, they're going to add it to the principal trial. Well, they said that in January after our first bird meeting, and they didn't add it. And so now they are going to add it, and their protocol is completely inadequate and kind of designed to fail. So,
Oh, is it? Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just like the hydroxychloroquine thing, all over again.
Yeah. And in actual fact, there's been so much, it's been such a weird story, this whole thing, because, there's a study in Argentina that actually finished in February. And I was in communication with the authors, like weekly, saying, please can we have your data on death? It's really important. There's a pandemic. If you could just let us have that data, it would be great. Don't worry, we don't have to wait till it's published. It's just really important if and they kept saying, next week. No, then they said, no, we'll wait until it's published. And they kept kicking it down. It's never been published, that paper. And that paper, I have it, shows a positive effect of ivermectin. Whereas there's a Colombian study which shows a negative effect, not negative, it just doesn't show a positive effect. It shows, but it's in mild disease. It's been a highly criticized paper because there's so many issues with it. Their randomization was messed up. It was funded by Big Pharma with interests in vaccines. And it got published in JAMA. And the authorities all recommend this paper very highly as being the definitive proof that ivermectin doesn't work. So there's so much funny business going on around ivermectin.
Yeah, I mean, you did share something with us which we can't go into here, but I'm hoping that you will share that video at some point, because
I do intend to
it's mind-blowing. It just shows the corruption that is going on at the highest levels. Tess, I can't thank you enough, but we are now pressed for time. But ivermectin. There it is. Niels has his tube of horse ivermectin. It's for 1,000-kilo horse. So I'll do the old joke. He's going to need 2 for his mother-in-law. I'm going to joke that.
Yeah. I'm sorry. This is a mirror image, apparently. But this is what you need if your horse get COVID. This is what you need. You can treat 1,250 pounds body weight.
Okay.
And buy it on the web in the United States.
Actually, you're joking, but I have communications from doctors in South Africa who used that quite a lot before they managed to get permission for pharmacies to compound. They use it topically, not orally. And Dr. Jackie Stone says it's very well absorbed. In actual fact, it's not Jackie, maybe it's Jackie. Anyway, one of the doctors I've spoken to says it's actually very well absorbed and may even be better absorbed through the skin than it is orally. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's news.
I have a question. Is that for the horses or for the cats or the dogs? You know that? Because what I've heard is that veterinarian products are not subject to the same scrutiny in terms of purity.
Yeah, so they're not as pure as a human oral ivermectin. So but these companies do have quality assurance. I can't speak for them, but ideally you don't want to be taking veterinary products. But if it's life and death, I know what I would do.
It's probably easily as pure as the vaccines are. The vaccines are completely dirty.
Okay. That's
Yeah,
another.
Yeah, I use the horse one personally. Listen, we have to move on. Thank you again, Tess. It's great. So great to see you.
Sam?
Moving on to our lovely friend from the Philippines. Yeah, are we moving on also? Is that what you're telling me?
No, Thomas has had his hand up.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Thomas. I didn't see you.
Thank you for your presentation, Tess. Just one question. As highly likely, many other viral respiratory infections are mislabeled as COVID by the RT-PCR test. Do you know whether there are former studies about ivermectin in, say, influenza or other viral infections? Because, well, maybe this is just a therapy for COVID-like disease, whatever the cause is.
Yeah, it's actually really exciting. I have to say, you know, there was a paper published this week, a review, actually not this week, I think last week. It's a review of the mechanisms of action of ivermectin, and it works in about 20 different ways. So, you know, it works from a host perspective as well as viral, and, you know, whether or not you believe this is a virus or not, it seems to coat the spike protein and so on. So I actually think ivermectin is going to be needed by everybody. It's going to be needed by the vaccinated and the unvaccinated because it mops up spike protein and boosts the immune system. And in terms of other, I think it will probably work against the flu and many other viral infections once we get a chance to actually use it. The other thing that was really interesting actually was a paper I came across from 2017 on the effect of ivermectin on heart muscle, and it increases ATP and oxygenation, basically. So it's been shown to. So, and I just wondered, in terms of all these people suffering from myocarditis from the vaccines, whether, in actual fact, that would be another way that it might make people who suffering from those sorts of adverse events from the vaccines better, because that in myocarditis inflammation is certainly caused from the spike protein.
Thanks.
I see Gillian has the hand up too.
Could I just ask Karen? Dr. Margareta has sent me a WhatsApp. It says you are unable to rejoin this meeting because you were removed by the host.
Yeah, unfortunately I can't undo that.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
I just tell her it's impossible then. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay.
There was a lot of weird things going on there in this meeting. And guys didn't notice. Okay.
Really? Okay. We're being hacked.
Yeah.
Can we go to the Philippines now?
Yes, please.
Is this Iggy from the Philippines?
Hi, this is Iggy. Yeah, I'm on first time.
Who's the man in the photo then, Iggy? Who's that? Is that your brother?
Yeah, sorry, that's a 10-year-old photo, but they asked me to give you the best photo I have.
Welcome. It's great to see you.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me here. But sorry if I'm a little not as energetic. It's 2 a.m. here in the Philippines. So, but we're also excited to be able to participate in an event like this. And as you know, we're the only country where we're forced to wear a face shield over our face masks outdoors. So it's really a difficult thing. So as an orthopedic surgeon, I see the problems when you trip because of the face mask and the face shield together and your glasses on. You would tend to have an orthopedic injury, so I get a little benefit from that. But of course, it is a problem. But I think it's a symbol of our government trying to impose on us their tyranny. So I share the feelings that you shared to me about the tyranny of our country. But the Philippines is, I think, one of the worst, one of the longest lockdowns in Asia. Still, one of the worst number of cases and deaths in Asia.
That's terrible. I can't believe they force you to wear a face shield and a mask in that heat.
Correct.
Oh my God, it's evil.
we're moving to try to get that out. But some experts, they always claim there's an expert, and they don't show us the names or the faces of the experts that they claim to agree to this concept of face shield. And of course, we're still fighting they're still against ivermectin. Similar stories. We all have these stories against of the government against ivermectin. We're looking now at Indonesia. There seems to be some good news in Indonesia. Very similar to our country.
What's the good news in Indonesia?
Well, I think they're bankrolling the ivermectin, and it's going to be rolled out throughout the country because a rich person there decided to bankroll it. But it's still off-label. The same with the Philippines. You can only prescribe it off-label.
Okay. Well, that is good news. So let's hope we can get ivermectin everywhere around the world. Tess, are you starting to make it now?
Am I starting to make it?
Yeah, I'm joking. we need ivermectin worldwide. Did you want to say any more, Iggy?
Oh, nothing more. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for staying up so late. It is wonderful you joined, and I hope you'll join again. So yeah, thank you ever so much, and thank you, Tess. I see you've got to go, so thanks ever so much. We'll catch up soon. Okay, so we're going to Brazil now. Tudo bem? If that's right.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, Lucy. Tudo bom?
Far away, but we have a big organization here. It's Doctors for Lives. We have about 12,000 doctors part of this organization. We are giving lectures every week for teaching these people to do prophylaxis and COVID treatment. And we are being very successful to convince many mayors to start doing the prophylaxis, and with very good results. And despite the very good results, this has not been adopted as the country for the whole country. This is the bad thing. But we are having many plans for the next weeks to start it's like a work, small work, but very effective, working with the businessmen, with the very popular people using the WhatsApp, because we are not have any accessible to the media, the official media, not at all. They take off everything we put on. Just this weekend, they took off 5 of my videos. You understand? But there is one thing that I would like very much to share with the people who is working with ivermectin. And the thing I would like to work is about the treatment and the doses of ivermectin that has to be used. And for prophylaxis, I would say it's sufficient to inhibit just the receptors for ACE2. But for treatment, we need much more, because there is numerous sites that ivermectin acts by blocking and inhibiting the disease, and they have to have more medication for do this work. And also, the medication has to act as anti-inflammatory medication. You understand? You can decrease the doses of corticoid. That is very dangerous. If you have a diabetic patient, you just do a mess with him. You understand? Many people will die not from COVID, but from the diabetes, this compensation. You understand? So it's very important to give much more of the medication during the disease. And this is, you have to decide 2 times, 3 times, 5 times, and no problem at all. There is no side effects is very safe. I have a very good experience about that. And I just would like to share this experience because I'm working with ivermectin and patients since March last year. Okay, and that's what I want to say for everyone. And thank you to invite me. And I represent the life in Brazil.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Brazil.
So, Zach, Dr. Coetzee from South Africa is unable to get into the meeting. There's something really odd going on. So we're going to have to skip over him. Unfortunately, he's up in the middle of the night from South Africa. But
oh no! Oh well, we'll send him our apologies. Who's up next?
We're moving on to the next segment with Dr. Palmer.
Okay, Dr. Palmer, carry on, sir.
Okay, hello. Brief intro. My name is Michael Palmer, German accent, English name. I grew up in Germany, trained as an MD, and now teach biochemistry at University of Waterloo in Ontario. I'm working with the Doctors of COVID Ethics, and I thought I was invited to present a few of our initiatives. The first one, the one that you see on the agenda, is the D-dimer study, which was initiated by Sucharit Bhakti and also has been taken up by Charles Hough, family doctor in British Columbia. And Charles recently reported a small case series. So this study, just a bit of background. So the idea is to monitor D-dimers, which is a parameter of activation of blood coagulation, as you know, before and after vaccination, right? So patients who are determined to get the vaccine are invited to have their shot monitored, so to speak. So they get a baseline D-dimer determination before the vaccination, and then they get a second determination afterwards to see whether through the vaccination blood coagulation is triggered. And in his limited case series, apparently already adjusted for age, 3 out of 8 patients showed elevated D-dimers as a consequence after the shot, right? So these were patients who were not necessarily having any severe side effects. Apparently one of them did have, but others had only transient and trivial symptoms. Now, our goal is to collect more such data. So what we would want, if possible, is for other physicians who are in a position to make this recommendation to their patients to have their blood coagulation function monitored, because there can be a benefit, there could be a benefit for the patient as well, right? If indeed in a given patient blood coagulation is activated after the shot, it might be worthwhile thinking about anti-clotting therapy, anticoagulation therapy. And we have a website that is still in the making, but that these results could be submitted to. I can put that in the chat later. Okay, so that's one important thing, because I think if we can document in sufficiently high number of patients that indeed vaccination activates blood clotting, I think then we have evidence of widespread, potentially severe adverse reactions. Another initiative of our group is to set up an independent adverse events reporting website. You may have seen reports that adverse events, individual reports are being disappeared from the VAERS database in the United States. I'm not sure whether similar experience exists in other databases as well. So we want to, in collaboration with Children's Health Defense, we want to set up our own reporting website. The backend is already in place. We are simply going to use VaxTracker, which you may be familiar with. But the idea is, right, VaxTracker is geared towards, VaxTracker is offered to the public at large, so everybody themselves
You've been muted, Michael.
Somebody muted you.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure for how long have I been muted?
No, only for 5 seconds.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, right. So the back end of our website is Vax Tracker, which is a fairly sophisticated system. It can also be used with multiple languages. So the website can automatically adjust itself, both with respect to the interface and to the medical diagnosis, which can be selected from while the report is being filed. This can be adapted to very many languages. So we want to target this at medical healthcare professionals, physicians, nurses, and so on, to gather, if possible, accurate and meaningful data. And we hope to get it up and running very soon. And once that's the case, I hope we can share this with groups like those represented here so that we can get it widely advertised. Okay, so I would also like to, probably shouldn't take up too much time, but I want to make a few points about these data which have recently surfaced. Right, you may have seen that Pfizer in Japan actually filed a pharmacokinetic study on the distribution of their vaccines in experimental animals. And what a few points I would like to make about these data is, firstly, right, in these measurements, the lipid component of the vaccine, you know that the Pfizer vaccine contains messenger RNA and lipids, and the lipids are supposed to simply help the messenger RNA being taken up into target cells. Okay, so these are cationic lipids. And in this study, they actually spent a lot more time looking at the distribution of the lipids, which were radioactively labeled, so they could be accurately and sensitively measured in different tissues and organs throughout the body. But there was also a bit of measurement on the expression of the mRNA, but the focus, interestingly, was on these lipids. Okay, so one important point is that the vaccine showed up to a very large extent in the circulation, right? So with a conventional vaccine, we typically assume most of the material remains in the tissue or is processed in the regional lymph nodes and so on, and not very much of the vaccine ends up in the circulation. With this Pfizer vaccine, that's not the case. A large proportion ends up in the circulation, and it does so remarkably rapidly, right? It peaks, the plasma level peaks after 2 hours, but even after 15 minutes, a mere 15 minutes after the injection, we already see almost half of that maximal, of that peak level in the circulation. To me, that means the vaccine breaks down the capillary barrier. There's just no other way it gets into the circulation this fast, okay? The next point is, all right, so we must assume vaccine is rapidly and effectively taken up into the circulation, so any complications that would arise downstream of uptake into the circulation are going to arise. And that is probably the reason why we see so much activation of blood clotting, for example. Then the next point, the vaccine showed some, or at least the lipids, showed some remarkable organ preferences. Highest level was observed in the liver, then spleen was fairly high, adrenal glands were high, and ovaries were high, and a couple of others I won't go into. But spleen and liver have a lot of macrophages. Macrophages, as you know, clean up junk, so that's probably part of it. The liver, the adrenal glands, and the ovaries take up lipoproteins, and that probably is the mechanism of uptake into these organs. Okay, and the liver, right, is represented both with the macrophages and the lipoproteins, which probably accounts for the particularly high level in that organ. In the liver, they also detected expression of the model mRNA. Now, if indeed the lipoproteins are responsible for uptake of the vaccine into organs, then we must also assume that the placenta will take it up, because the placenta uses lipoprotein for making progesterone in large amounts. And we must also expect it to accumulate in the lactating mammary glands, because those take up the lipoproteins in order to transport cholesterol and other lipids into the breast milk. Okay, so what this means is that from the preclinical data that Pfizer was submitted to Japan, we could already anticipate all the complications we are seeing now. We could anticipate the blood clotting problems. We could anticipate troubles with fertility. And there's actually a recent report which came through Mary Holland, a young woman in a fertility clinic who had actually successfully donated eggs a couple of times after being twice vaccinated with the Moderna vaccine, her eggs now die off after 5 days. Okay, at the modular stadium, the eggs now die off. And that is actually compatible with lipid toxicity. Okay, these cationic lipids, they are known to be taken up into cells. After all, that's the purpose of the use in this vaccine. Once inside a cell, they disrupt mitochondrial function. This generates oxidative stress, and this in turn has been shown to kill off early embryos. Okay, so what one more point, basic point is that these lipids have an extraordinarily long half-life of elimination. They stay in the body for months. Now, if you take this very long half-life in combination with the plan of revaccinating everybody every couple of months, then you have a recipe for cumulative toxicity. Okay, so what I'm driving at here is we need to take seriously the possibility that the real poison that they want to inject us with is not the mRNA. The mRNA, bad as it is, it might have a leading role in blood clotting and this kind of thing. It's only going to kill a smaller number of people. But what I'm driving at is we need to take seriously the possibility that the lipid is the poison and that the key effect of this poison is infertility, that this is indeed a sterilization program. And this would explain why they are so keen on injecting the young people now, because they want to sterilize them, particularly the women, apparently. Okay, so mRNA, right? So we cannot neglect the toxicity of the spike protein, which is probably real, but I think we should not lose sight of the possibility that the lipid is another key toxic component, and that that the infertility, which was observed so far only in a small number of cases, obviously, but there was also an effect in these Pfizer data. Okay, they didn't properly document it, but there was clear also an increased rate of loss of early embryos in the rats. Okay, and this was only after experimental vaccination 2 times. There was no cumulative toxicity involved in that case. Okay, so I think we need to take that possibility seriously, and I think we need to get scientists involved into figuring out what this, whether or not there is substance to this angle. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you.
Michael, thank you. I think you're so right. It is the cationic nanolipids, isn't it? That's been brought up in one of the Ryan and Formic interviews. I'm quite sure. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm not having the vaccine, but okay. Thank you. Anyone got questions for Michael? Thank you. Dr. T. Hello at last. We finally speak.
Hiya.
Hi.
Yeah, just kind of adding on to that, so I'm not crazy typing. I think it's a really targeted approach. So I think you've got the toxicity of the spike protein. I think you've got the toxicity of the nanolipid. But then if you look at all the papers that show, and including on the data that comes from the companies themselves, if you add in magnetic qualities to that nanoparticle, what it's capable of completely off scales. So it not only does it massively increase how much it can go into individual cells that it could go into before without the magnetic quality, but if you add in that, it also, if you look on their kind of data sets of the company, they show off about saying it will also go into cells that were otherwise struggling to take up your particular protein or DNA or an RNA. So that's the actual thing they're specifically saying. Add in this magnetic quality as well, and it's a danger.
I have not seen any such evidence.
Okay, so I think Mark Plain is on here somewhere as well, and we can together.
Yeah, I was going to say that
segues
nice.
Show it to you.
That segues nicely into Mark, who thank you for joining us, Mark. I just want to say that initially I thought this was nonsense, right? And I'm sure most of us here did too. But there's now documents published about this, and I'm sure Mark's going to fill us in. This is part of the robotic agenda, right? The transhumanist agenda.
Yeah.
So Mark, far away, sir. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Zach. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me on. I'll be as quick as I can. I'll hand back to Dr. T where she was. Yeah, just as Zach said, when I first saw a first video of a magnet sticking to somebody, I passed it by them. The second one, then 2 friends called me. Next thing I knew, I was on the train to check it out for myself, made a film about it, and we've been chasing this since. Of course, the basic ingredients within the vaccines are classed as sugars, salts, fats. There's water in there. So there's nothing that should be magnetic. We've chased that trail down through spions, super paramagnetic nano-oxide nanoparticles into a whole area of other possibilities to what is causing this magnetism on the skin. And we've come to a pretty terrible conclusion, or maybe the conclusion that we need right now, which is that there is an undeclared ingredient in the vaccine. And just last night, the way it's been looking, we've gone past the nanoparticles, these spions, into graphene. And a Spanish television show with a group of doctors, they're grouped together, released some electron microscope pictures last night, which show what matches perfectly on pictures, sheets of graphene and graphene oxide. And that's actually taken from the vaccine vial, which then means if there is undisclosed ingredients, there's the ability to get an injunction to stop the rollout of the vaccine. I've put a PDF in the chat. It's a bit further up now. I put that in about an hour ago, which just links the basic call to action, the statement that Dr. T did. And the big thing to kind of draw attention to is what we're looking at is not just a single, this attack on humanity isn't a single component. It's one part is coming through the vaccine, another part seems to be contaminant in the masks, another part is contaminants in the swabs, which has been detailed in a Slovak paper with hydrogel there. And it's a mixture also then of electromagnetic frequencies being used to work with the hydrogel alongside the magnetism. And yeah, and also just a few days ago, I think Zach posted the article literally on the British government website. A pamphlet, 110-page document has been published. It's from the Ministry of Defence of Britain that was in conjunction with the German defence, and it's the transhuman agenda. And probably the key message within that document that we saw just in paragraph, and I haven't read the whole thing yet, was just that this transhuman agenda needs to go forward, and it needs to maybe override ethicists' public opinion and what we perceive as a current morality, so that we can get to the next stage. So I'm sorry to say that all kind of so quickly, a huge kind of information dump, but that's where we are right now.
Mark, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm sure I've got 1,000,001 questions. But my feeling is that we are being, the people being vaccinated are being labelled like cattle are labelled with a tag in their ear. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, there's evidence, and again, we're chasing this, so this is just kind of a route of inquiry, but with a certain phone, people are picking up Bluetooth signals coming from people which are varying, and I haven't seen it myself. I'm tracking down one of these phones to use. It's a Samsung S7, if anybody gets interested in that. I think it's 100% possibility, and if every vial of the vaccine has a barcode on, there's a reason there to track it and identify the person. And what also the Spanish investigators have worked out with the hydrogel, I mean, without a doubt, the way the hydrogel organises this is in like a matrix structure that is for receiving, but they also believe it's for transmitting.
Well, can I just go back a little bit? Samsung S7, people are picking up a Bluetooth signal from a vaccinated person, right?
They're picking up codes. Yeah, they're picking up a whole series of codes. But I'm not going to concentrate on this one bit, because for me, I haven't verified it. What I have verified is 99% of every single person who's had a Pfizer injection, we can stick a magnet on and it sticks. We've tested this 100%. I've spoken with a patient who's in Florida hospital called Brittany, who walked in with spoons sticking to her. She's been in hospital for maybe 2 weeks now. They put her under MRI scans, and now she can barely walk.
Thank God. You know, you've got a nanoparticle scientist here, Niels Harrit, who found the nano explosives at 9/11.
Wow.
Niels, have you a question, Niels?
I do. Well, first, to maybe straighten out a few concepts here. What is called the nanoparticles of the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines should probably be called liposomes. It's not a particle, it is a little bag which resembles a cell, and which has what you call it, a skin, a membrane, which is anionic and not cationic, as you said, Zach. It's impossible. I mean, this would be pure poison to inject if it was cationic.
No, it is definitely cationic. It is definitely cationic.
This is like a positive detergent, and this will be pure poison if you injected that.
Yeah, of course, it is pure poison. It is pure poison.
Okay.
Okay.
Nevertheless, but I would still call it a liposome and not a particle. And the distribution study which you referred to, Michael, is very, very relevant. Another thing before we proceed this discussion is that magnetism is not a thing. It's a force, like gravity. So it's not a thing. You cannot talk about inject magnetism. You should concentrate on the thing. And a magnet is a thing, which is a North Pole and a South Pole. And it can attract material which is magnetizable, which can be magnetized, like a piece of iron. And the graphene thing, which was introduced by Mark, is the first thing I have heard anything which comes close to a thing. And from my knowledge, it's true that graphene came very much into the scene about 10, 15 years ago and actually got the Nobel Prize. But to my knowledge, it cannot be magnetized by any means. And people are very much mixing up, what you say, electricity and magnetism, which are two completely different things. So you cannot, if you have a charged molecule, it cannot be attracted by a magnet. So, and I may also, before I leave the word to whoever, is that I have been involved actually in trying to use magnetizable nanoparticles for what we call stereotactic medicine, where we actually try to locate medicine around ulcers in cancer treatment. Is very, very difficult. And the magnetic fields that we were operating with were enormous compared to the magnets here. To have a nanoparticle and hold it upstream against the bloodstream, you need a tremendous force for doing that. Just to say that I've been involved in magnetic particles for medical treatment, and we spent a lot of money, and we ended when the funds dried up. This was 50 years ago. So I've been there. Okay?
Niels, thank you. Thank you. Dr. T wants to come back.
I just wanted to say I've read a paper today and I will be able to access it, but I can't remember at the moment from what date. But in that, they are specifically saying about graphene being able to have a long-lasting magnetism. And that was what was specific in that, saying that that was new, that before when they'd managed to induce graphene to have a magnetic quality, it wasn't lasting. Now they can get it to last. I'm sorry, I can't just tell it you off the top of my tongue, but that information actually is out there.
Yeah, I would have a proposal, as we are running late on this, that in 2 weeks' time we will ask someone to come in and give some more details and scientific basis to the magnetism question.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Mark, you haven't really introduced yourself. You are not on the Beeb, right? What's your website?
Yeah, not on thebeeb.co.uk. And I've just published, there's a new link there under research, and I've put all the links there going to all the papers. And they even show the graphene oxide within the liposome alongside the mRNA. Yeah.
So I heard that the spike protein had a magnetic particle on one end of it. Is that correct? Have you heard that? No, am I dreaming? I don't know. I see so much research.
No, that's correct. On one of the papers from one of the, I think, biotech companies, they have like a little illustration on that where they show what they then say they'd used in the development, or Pfizer used in the development of their vaccine. And that shows exactly that, a kind of wiggly mRNA and then this kind of magnetic nanoparticle on the end.
Yeah. Can you tell us what, I mean, you made a video, right, Dr. T, and you stuck magnets onto vaccinated people, right?
Yes.
Tell us more. What? Were you surprised or what?
So I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised because when I watch videos and listen to other people, I guess I use all my senses and I'm quite intuitive. And so I was already feeling that I was going to see it to be the case. But it's still, when you feel it, and you actually can get that sense of what's happening, it helps. And I would say to anyone who is still in any way suspicious about this, I would just ask them, could they please actually just get a neodymium magnet on someone that's had a Pfizer or Moderna vaccine so that they can then get on board, because we're actually really running out of time to actually have the conversations about, we're not making this up. I actually just feel it gets really hard when we're at that level.
Well, one thing that you can take to the bank is it was announced on the BBC, wasn't it, about the magnets? Do you want to tell everyone about that?
I'll let you have that, Mark.
Yeah, this was one of those great ping pong moments. We did a call out. I made some films to raise awareness called under the hashtag Magnet Challenge, and it was going viral, going absolutely crazy. And then we said to everyone, get bow and buy a neodymium magnet. This is what's needed. Those films went out on early one week, and by the Saturday morning, as we were arriving to do the magnet challenge with Dr. T in the park and get a load of random walkabys, it came out on the BBC News that they did an announcement with the NHS to say that neodymium magnets were now classed as a health and safety risk for young children, as a swallowing risk.
Can I ask you a question, Mark? Have you done any assessment of beef and chicken? Because I saw something recently about magnetism happening in processed beef and chicken. Is that recent? I mean, I know they've been dealing with this type of technology for a long time. Maybe it's been there for a long time, but people are just starting to look for it because of the effect of the vaccine.
There's a lot of confusing videos and evidence at the moment, and the beef we checked, as soon as we dusted it down and got rid of the frost, got rid of the moisture, the magnets didn't stick. There's a lot of people thinking because it's hot, they're sticking things on with their sweat, and of course it sticks with body moistures. There's a big difference. When something's magnetic, you literally can feel it being snatched out of your hand. And if it's a magnet, if it's the wrong polarity towards the skin, it will flip in your skin. You can actually feel it jump. And you can see this in a lot of the videos that we caught. So I wouldn't be. I
tried it. I tried it. I didn't find it at all. But I just thought, have you come across this? Yeah. Okay.
No, I mean, we haven't replicated it, not at all. So this is why I was just saying about avoiding the Bluetooth. It's just concentrating on the fact that magnets stick to the point of injection, and some people are experiencing it on their chest, and some people have got a magnetism so crazy they're able to stick large metal objects on them. Lots of people now are sticking batteries on their chest, which are rolling across the chest. There's some countless videos of this. But again, I haven't verified that one myself.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Can we move on, Zach? And then really in 2 weeks' time, you'll find someone, to look at in greater details the magnetism. There are a lot of fake things out there. We need to be really cautious with that.
Oh yeah. I mean, like you, totally unconvinced to begin with, but now that document's come out from the UK government, from the Ministry of Defence with the transhumanist agenda. I think it pretty much confirms our suspicions, right, Mark? So I'd love to have you come back on next time, Mark. Yeah, give us an update, and perhaps we'll have be nice to have a longer time with you, and Dr. T as well, please. That would be great. Thank you so much. So are we going to Sweden next? Is that right?
Yes.
Lost track of where we're going. Sweden, tell us more, the country that didn't lock down.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm Dr. Hanna Osberg. I live outside of Stockholm. So I'd like to, how much time do I have? Are we running late?
I don't know, give us 5 minutes of excitement for Sweden, yeah.
Okay.
And
so,
I can have you down for 10 minutes, just so you know.
I know. All right. Okay, so I've started an initiative in Sweden, a little group. It's still quite an informal group of healthcare staff. We're 6 people at the time being, 3 doctors from school medicine. We have Monica, who's a naturopath, 1 lab analyst, and 1 nurse in our group. And a lot of Swedes speak quite good English, but I've still felt there's a need for information in Swedish, especially for elderly people and for immigrants. So I've had this idea about how to stop the injection program, and I think what we need to do is to address this personally on a large scale throughout the healthcare organization, because at the government level, there are already happening things there, but I honestly don't think that the government will stop this. At the same time, we're just having a government crisis. So our Prime Minister has had a mistrust declaration last Monday. So we might have an extra election this year, which has never happened before in Sweden. Our ordinary election is supposed to be next year. So on the political level, it's kind of shaky here right now. It could be good for us. We don't know yet. But anyway, so I've started this little group called Bota Sverige, which translates to Cure Sweden. And we had a press conference yesterday outside the Public Health Authority. And what we've done is we've written a letter we try to keep it quite short, but very clear statements about, like a summary about why this is wrong. And with scientific references in it. And then at the press conference, we really wanted to keep this short, because if it's too long, people stop listening. So we have an abbreviated version of the letter that me and a doctor called Glenn Dormer, he's not here tonight, I don't think, but he's been in this video meeting a few times. So we read this letter in a Swedish version and an English version. There were some people there, the alternative media was there, the mainstream media was not there, and medical magazines were not there either, they're not interested. So we have a lot of censorship, just like everybody else, and mainstream media is just propaganda, it's terrible. And then after the press conference, Glenn and I personally went to the authority and we handed in this letter to the general director. And I will just briefly show you if I can share my screen. There we go. So there's an article on this magazine called newsvoice.se. And here's an article. They have an English part of their website. So here's an article about me and Glenn, and there's a video clip as well. This is alternative media, right? So there's a video clip here. And then we've started a web page called Bota Sverige. It's a very simple web page, but I was inspired by the Israeli People's Committee. I don't know if you've seen their web page, but it's quite a simple web page. And just to have transparency, to show people that this is happening. This is the Swedish flag here. And here is the letter, this is the abbreviated version of the letter. There's a Swedish version and here's an English version, so that anybody in the public can just go here and read it and see that there are actually healthcare staff doing something. I mean, there are other doctors, Swedish doctors who've tried, but it's just like in all other countries, they are punished and so on, different ways. So I think to get this message out, the idea is to try and keep it very short. But we looked at the data for Sweden, and we're using this data So we're trying to cover everything, like the death toll is not higher, the definition of the pandemic, the influenza more or less disappeared this winter season that was just passed. This is one good thing with Sweden, that a lot of data is official. You can go onto the web pages of the authorities and get the official data, and you can use this against them to prove our point. The PCR tests, the face masks, the vitamin D, which they've completely lied about in Sweden and just covered it up. So nobody knows, or like the general population don't know about the correlation between vitamin D deficiency and COVID-19. The ivermectin, which we can't prescribe here, it's not approved as a pharmaceutical drug for humans. Hydroxychloroquine, zinc, and azithromycin, which people don't get here either. Lockdowns, I mean, we don't have lockdowns like in a lot of other countries, but we have some restrictions. We're not in a normal state of society. And this is another point I wanted to make with this press conference, to explain to, if there's anybody from any other country watching this video clip on the internet, since it's both in Swedish and in English, is to explain that Sweden is going through the same problem as everybody else. So our society is more open than in many other countries, but we have restrictions still. So we wrote about the experimental injection for children. They want to start from the age 16 and above soon. And then towards the autumn, they want to start from the age of 12. So we're getting the same thing here, that they want to inject the children. Yeah, and we wrote about this is a phase 3 and phase 4 experimental trial, and they've skipped the informed consent, which is against the Nuremberg Code. I also have data, it's not here in this abbreviated version, but I have data from the medicine drug authority, that the adverse events report, only 11.5% of the reports that have arrived or were sent to the authority, only 11.5% are analyzed. So the authority are sitting with a big pile of adverse event reports that nobody has looked at them, and still they keep injecting people. And we've also written about the vaccine passports, that they will lead to an apartheid system. So the point with this, like our main point here, is that we demand that all COVID injections are stopped immediately in all age groups. And so this was done yesterday, and now I'm working on finishing the longer version. It's almost finished, the longer version of this letter with the references. And then we want to send this out to personally, basically to the whole, like Sweden is divided into 21 regions, and the region is responsible for running the public health care in that geographical area. And each region has a political board. So this board is responsible for this injection program. And then there are a few private companies who also run the healthcare on public funds. And these private companies also perform injections on patients. So we also need to address this level. And the idea with this letter is that we can send it to a lot of people personally. This is quite work demanding, but I think this is what's needed now. It needs to be personally addressed, and it needs to be very clear and upfront. And if they don't stop injecting it, people after we've sent this letter, we've requested in the longer version that we expect them to reply within 15 days. And this is according to Swedish law that covers the any public organization, that if you send a question to them, they are obliged to reply within 15 days. So the idea is also to see if we get any reply or see their reaction to this letter. If they keep injecting people after this, we could use this letter the next step would be a police report or suing them. So there's also that part that I want to get in the letter, or like beginning that kind of work. Since last Friday, when I emailed the invitation to the press conference, what I've noticed, I didn't quite or I didn't think about this, or I didn't expect it. I don't know. I didn't have a very long-term plan with this. I just wanted to get this out to try and stop the injections. But what's happened is that there's been a lot of reaction from citizens and some healthcare staff as well, especially nurses. But a lot of citizens have emailed me and phoned me. They have questions about the spike proteins, the PCR tests, the injections. These are all the people who don't want to have the injection, but many of them don't have any support. So several people told me, like, all my workmates have had the injections, or all my neighbors, and I'm feeling kind of lonely. I don't get support. They've had legal questions. Several of them need some kind of medical attention, but they don't want to go and see a doctor who's had the injection. So there's a demand for the people who don't want to take the injection. There's a demand from them to see healthcare staff who have not had the injection, because they are concerned about the transmission of spike protein. So there's clearly a need for, I clearly see a need for general support and building up something new clinics, I don't know. I just realized this is huge after all, everybody, so many people called me. So that's that.
Thank you, Hannah. Hannah, that's amazing. Can we will you send that letter out? Can you post it into the chat? Can we have it? Can we use it?
Yeah, sure. You can use it. And please share these links. We want to share it as much as possible now. So I'll put these links in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah, please do. Yeah. Put them in the chat, and we'll want to share that. It's fantastic work. I think you're so right. It needs to be a personal letter now.
Yeah.
We need to empower the people to send a personal letter to their doctor, to their school, to their MP, whatever. And they take the power back. The people need to take the power back, and we need to empower them to do that. So Thank you. What you've done is amazing. Thank you.